You used to work on Wall Street. That sounds terribly glamorous and exciting. Tell me about that time of your life.
Yeah, so it was super exciting. So I worked on Wall Street, just up the road from the stock exchange, and I was actually there in 2000 when the stock exchange crash happened. So it was like the dot-com boom, everything was going up, and then it all exploded out.
And so was your work quite stressful, or was it cool? It sounds like you were kind of doing stuff at the frontier of the dot-com era.
Yeah, so it was very exciting. It was all dot-com startups. There was like a hip-hop startup and all these different startups in there. And it was there was long hours, but New York at that point was very cool because of all the dot-com stuff that was going on. So you could order M&Ms and they would get delivered by someone on a bicycle to your door. So it was so cool.
And then what happened? So the stock exchange crashed, then what happened?
So the stock exchange crashed. It actually impacted, obviously, because I was building websites, it impacted my industry. And about 18 months later, I actually lost my job.
Right. So you made redundant. And how did that affect you?
I totally hadn't seen it coming, so it was an absolute shock. And I can remember like riding home after I was given my notice, just tears streaming down my face going, what am I going to do? Because Kim and I were about to get married. I was the breadwinner, she was at university, and I was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, and so many of us, we carry on our lives in a certain direction, and then if something random happens and you need to change direction, how do you cope with that?
Well, I think the key thing is that you've got to work out where you want to go from there. And so for me, that was quite clear. Like I had that whack of, hey, I've lost my job. And I went, wow, what did I want to do with my life? Well, I wanted to start a business. And so I looked for a job a little bit, wasn't finding a job. So I went, great, I'll start a business.
So what would you say to people who want to maybe take the leap, maybe start their own business, or maybe change job direction, something like that, and are a bit nervous about doing it?
I think the key thing for me is that you've got to work out where your passions lie, because any road that you go down, there'll be, setbacks and pitfalls and those sorts of things. And so if it's something that you're passionate about, then it's much easier to, to keep going when you do get those kind of knocks where you're like, oh, this isn't working. But if you love it and you're passionate about it, then it's much easier to keep going.
Yeah. Now you coach people in business mindset now. How does that work?
Well, it came from me originally. So when I first started working with my mentor, I was all like, oh, direct response marketing and copywriting and sales and all that sort of stuff.
That's that passion you were talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, yeah, all excited about it. And but what happened was we got a bit further, like improved a few things in the business, but I went, I'm still not really getting to where I want to go. Yeah. And I realized that it was actually my thinking that was limiting me. So although I had the right strategies, I didn't have the right mindset to actually be able to use them.
And how can you change that though? Aren't we all creatures of habit and we think the same thoughts time and again?
Well, we are creatures of habit, but the more you change those habits, the easier it becomes to change it. So for me, I can remember when I first started, I was in a little rented flat, sitting in the little bedroom, typing away on a card table and just actually talking to myself, going, come on, you can do this, what are you doing, come on.
Yeah, crack that whip, yeah.
Yeah, basically trying to convince myself to do it.
Right.
And most people are like that, they're not used to changing. But the more I have changed, the more I can say, go and hear someone like you speak, and the next day, or even the same day, things will change for me.
Why, thank you. Well, so many people tell me that they procrastinate. And I guess that's the dialogue that goes on in their head. But you must do it. I can't do it. You must. So how can you compensate for that procrastination?
Yeah, I was a huge, massive procrastinator. And I think the key thing is that when you're procrastinating, generally speaking, there's two values that are in conflict with each other, or at least two. So basically, you've got one value that says, well, yes, I should market and sell my business, I need to grow my business. But you've got another value, much of society sort of tries to avoid marketing and avoid sales. And they're like, oh, get those salespeople and that marketing out of my way. Yeah. And so those two values, if they coexist, you're likely to procrastinate and your marketing will get done at 3 o'clock on a Friday for a 4 o'clock deadline.
Yes.
Because you've got that thing that says, oh boy, I don't really like marketing, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who, I suppose most people, they go along until they get made redundant. Something else forces them to make a choice. But what would you say to somebody who wants to make a choice and is frightened to take the leap?
I think the first thing is that no matter what you do, when you change, you're going out of your comfort zone, you're going to feel scared and afraid. We just have to accept that. But it's like anything new. It's like becoming a parent. Like when you first start, it's like, oh my goodness, who put me in charge of this tiny little thing?
Yeah.
But you learn and you adapt and you work out how to do it. And there's plenty of support out there as well to help you.
And you don't just not do it because
No.
it's scary. Exactly.
Exactly, you still take action. So I guess the first thing is you want to get that support around you. So whether that's a mentor like me or joining business networking groups, they're great as well to get other business owners around you to build up your confidence and go, okay, cool, I can do this. Equally, one of the big things I've seen is the people who are usually successful at making that change from one thing to another. There's two approaches that I've seen that work really well. One is just the boots and all, they just throw themselves in the deep end. So they just go, I'm going to start a TV show, bam, I'll just throw myself in there. What could go wrong?
I don't know who you're talking
about. Yeah. So that's one approach, is the boots and all approach.
Yeah.
And then the other approach is a very measured approach of, right, say I'm in a corporate role, maybe I'm a project manager at Microsoft, and I want to, I want to quit my job, I want to start a startup. Like I'm in the tech space, I want to start my own startup. And what you do is you just go, great, well, how long do I want to be able to last when I quit my job? Maybe it's 12 months, maybe it's 18 months. And then you start saving up the money so that basically when you quit, you've got that buffer to go, hey, I can keep doing this for 12 months or 18 months, get some mass and momentum going, and I don't have to be like, oh my goodness, where's my next dollar coming from?
Yeah. Okay. And one last word of advice?
So the one last word of advice would be make good choices. So I think so often we get on autopilot. When you're driving your car and you forget where you're going and you go, oh my goodness, how did I end up here? That happens in life as well. So it's about making conscious choices.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Awesome, thank you.